Hey everyone, welcome back to our second episode of Hustle Productions. What's Your Hustle podcast? This is episode 2. We are here with Melissa. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Tell me a little bit about your business. Right, we've talked a little bit back and forth, but kind of give me a rundown of what you do and your business.
Sure. So I'm a career and leadership coach for women that work in pharma and biotech. And what I help them do is, when you're in your career and you work really hard to get where you are, and then you're like, oh, this is it. This isn't really what I thought my life was going to be like. I'm not really making the impact that I want to. I'm not really energized by my work. I help them figure out kind of what that next step is, whether it's a promotion or moving into a new role or even starting their own business. I just help them figure out what is that meaningful work path going to be for them. And then the other piece is helping them be a standout leader that's confident and the leader that people want to work for, because I think there's really a gap when it comes to providing the skills and tools that managers need that are really tactical and practical and allow them to really be themselves and not just like a cookie cutter version of what they see around the leadership table. So I help them figure out what type of leader they want to be so that they are really effective in their role and then also can advance their career.
How did you get into something like this?
Yeah, so I've been in some form of developing other people for pretty much my whole life. But my career in the industry was really around talent development and training and learning. And so I started coaching when I worked in industry. And so I would do that as a collaboration with our HR group. And then the more that I did that, the more that I found that it wasn't really authentic to me, because there's always a bias when it comes to coaching internally versus when you're working directly with a person and their interests without having HR or their manager know or having any sort of conflict. And so when I was coaching with my last company, I found it to be difficult because not everyone wants to work at that company. Not everyone wants to stay in the role that they're in. But that was the lens that I had to support people through. It also was just a small percentage of the time that I was able to spend in my role because I was responsible for so much around talent development. So I just think I was naturally a coach that started doing this in my 20 or so years in learning and talent development. And then the more I started making it part of my formal role within the company that I worked for, the more it became apparent that I would be more true to myself and be able to help people the way I wanted to if I did it outside of a company.
Sure. And, that's something where, did you stumble into it through your career at this company, or was it something that you've always wanted to do? You saw the opportunity with this company to maybe take on a role that would give you that opportunity?
Yeah, so I would say coaching, like formal coaching wasn't something that was really on my radar. Well, how it came to be was I had a lot of opinions about the way that things could be different in the workplace and the way that change management could be handled and the way that employees could be engaged and things that we could do to help employees feel comfortable and safe and engaged and see a future with the company. And as I was kind of having all of my opinions and talking to my manager one day in a one-on-one, he had said, have you ever thought of really pivoting from learning and development into more organizational development and making that a career? And I was like, no, I hadn't really thought about that. And so that kind of put me on the path I started looking into that. And then I went to grad school. And so I got a master's in organizational psychology. And through that graduate program, I was introduced to formal coaching outside of how I had been introduced to it in the past. And that led me on a path to then getting a certification in coaching and then taking clients kind of on the side. Sure. And integrating that into my role where I worked and ultimately leading me then to wanting to do it full time.
So that's exciting. So you kind of touched on that your supervisor at the time of this, I don't want to say discovery, but this kind of push forward, they kind of encouraged you, which you don't usually see in a larger company. They usually try to keep people, and it might have been the idea was, maybe they wanted you to kind of still work that internal route, see what you can do with the employees at the company you're with. But that's exciting where you kind of like had this aha moment, but it was kind of brought on by a conversation with somebody in your corporate position.
Yeah, and it was more of a, I would say, I don't know how supportive it was as opposed to you're complaining a lot about what the leadership is doing. And so maybe you should make a pivot and do this more professionally, because you have a lot of ideas and you could do it if you kind of pivoted more into the HR talent space. And so that really, like I said, got me thinking about it. And I was lucky enough that in that corporate role, they did really support me in kind of using them while I was in grad school. So when I was in grad school, there were a lot of projects I had to do around talent development and coaching managers, and they allowed me to use those projects with our company as opposed to finding another company or a nonprofit to do that work with. And so through that, I was able to demonstrate the value of that work, which allowed me then to be able to change my role for a couple of years before I left to focus on that organizational psychology and coaching piece.
Yeah, that's exciting, because, you know, it's one of those where you kind of were finding yourself while also kind of working at this position and being able to almost give like a trial run, right? See how you can really take what you learned in grad school and put it into the real world, right? And then see, okay, this is actually something I enjoy. When you did that, or like that kind of transition of, was it something that kind of caught on pretty quick where you're like, oh yeah, this is me. This is 100% what I want to do. And then it kind of drove you a little bit further into it, or was it kind of rocky at the beginning?
That's a good question. I would say organizational psychology is something I'm really passionate about. And so the work I was able to do with the company that I was working with was really beneficial for me in finding that coaching was the ultimate path I wanted to take. But I have this, the way that I look at my career is I never felt like I really figured out what that ideal role was for me. So every decision that I made throughout my career was just me following some passion that I had to try to figure out what is that path. So even when I was in these, you know, successful roles, I always knew that that wasn't the end game, that there was something more for me. I just didn't know what it was. And so following that passion and making those pivots allowed me to find what that was.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, and I don't think we've ever talked about it, but your path of working, you know, at that 9 to 5 and finding what you want to do and your passion, it's kind of sparked a little bit in myself. I know we've kind of gone back and forth when we were working together, and it was one of those where, like I was saying before, like you kind of just disappeared, but it, like asking around, it was a good, you know, disappear, right? You were kind of following your, you know, what you wanted to do. And that, you know, it's something that I kind of grew off as well, because where I am now is not where I want to be, right? That same thing, right? It's a position that quote unquote pays the bills. You know, it's a great company. It's a great business. You know, they do a lot of great things. That's not kind of where I want to be, though. This, you know, this kind of setting of creating and filming and, you know, I talk about it all the time with many people. And I even think I had a conversation in the last episode I had where it was, this is like, you kind of had that like spark of, okay, this is what I want. This happened to me in, I think, 2015 or 2016. And I was like, yeah, this is, how do I get more of this? And I took an unconventional, you know, YouTube University, learning all my tips and things. I think it was last year's when I took my first official like course of like, okay, how do we start putting this all together, and then kind of going from there. So I feel like I'm kind of a couple steps behind you in a sense of still kind of balancing, you know, the full-time and the what I want to be doing, and then hopefully, you know, in the future transitioning to, you know, full-time business owner, right? Yeah. So let's kind of go off, you know, so you were balancing both for a little bit. Walk me through that decision of, okay, I think it's time to kind of spread your wings and get out into the full-time business.
Okay, so first, I didn't know that. So I think
it's exciting.
Yeah, so it's always fun to see the impact that you have that you don't even know. And I know that you're doing that for people around you also. So that's really cool. I remember, you know, when I met you and you volunteered to take photos for our Network of Women event, and you had your business card and you're like, hey, I'm doing this. And I thought that was so inspiring because you're finding ways to integrate that where you are as opposed to really segregating it. So I thought that was fantastic. So I'm glad you asked this question, because I was going to ask you if you have that decision point of when you're going to take that leap. So for me, I had established my LLC the year before that I left. I had started preparing financially to take the leave to go full time. I had the support at home from my wife. So I had kind of put all of the things in place to be able to make that jump. And I started taking clients at night. It started because I had to, as part of my certification for coaching, is I had to take a certain number of clients and document the progress or in the process that they were going through, and to kind of prove that I knew what I was doing. And so I was really lit up by that. And it got to this point where I would say it was like the fall of 2019 is when I kind of had everything in order. But I was having a hard time letting go of everything that I had worked so hard for.
Yeah.
So I was like, I hadn't come from a lot, and I was really successful by my own measurement and from my family's perspective. You know, I had really come from humble beginnings, to say, and like I was, you know, making more than I had thought I ever would, and I was more successful than I knew I could be. And so it was really hard to leave that. And so I found myself coming up with reasons not to leave. So for example, we had a bonus period where every year we would get a bonus. And so I was like, okay, I'll leave in like the bonus period of 2021, you know, to give me lots of luxurious time to help prepare. And my daughter, who's 13 now, so she was about 9 or 10 then, she had written a letter to Santa that year of 2019, saying that she hoped that Santa could help me leave my job, that I was happy. She's like, she's really a life coach and she loves it, and hopefully she can do this all the time, and can you help her have her business? And that really melted my heart and showed me how even if you don't complain about your job, like your kids really can take notice about like what's really making you happy and what's not. And so that I was taking to heart. And so it just kind of got to this point where I decided to hire a coach to help me because it became where it wasn't a math problem. It was like a Melissa problem.
Sure.
So everything was like, I had all the support, I had all the things that could make me, and I was like, no, I can't give it up. Like, this isn't a good decision. I need to wait. And so I hired a coach in the spring. It was May of 2020. After kind of COVID had kicked in, and I said, okay, I want you to help me leave my job by April of 2021. So after that next bonus cycle.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where if especially once you get to the point where you're like, all right, I can make it a few more months, right? You know, because you have a general idea of what that, what that payoff is going to be.
And I was like, it's easy money. I was like, I'm good at my job. It doesn't take a lot of effort from me.
Sure.
So I can do that, bring in the payroll, continue to kind of pad my savings and leave later. And I hired that coach in May of 2020, and I gave my notice in the beginning of June. So it only took a few weeks. And so I moved up that timeline by a year because I realized it was me holding myself back.
Sure.
And part of that is just like, was my question for you too, is like working through those worst case scenarios. Because if you have that feeling that there's something more for you, if you have a passion, if you have something you want to do full time, like, you're the one that can make that happen. And so figuring out for me, it was, okay, let's say it doesn't work out. Let's say no one wants to hire me, or I don't make any money. Then what will I do?
Yeah.
And so working through all of those things helped me kind of just take the leap.
Yeah. And I have that thought in my head, or that question, I think every morning when I wake up is, all right, how do we get to full time, right? And how do we, and it's kind of transitioned a little bit. It's how do I get my wife to not be in the workforce, right? How do I get her to be a stay-at-home mom with my daughter? Because it's quickly, about a year ago, the idea of daycare was terrifying, right? And it's nothing on the daycare systems. It's just when it's completely different when like it's your kid and you're like, I want them to be the safest they can be at all times, right? That's obvious with parents and so that idea of daycare was frightening. And I jokingly told my wife, I was like, look, okay, one of us has to stop working because I don't know if I can get through this. Obviously, it's a year later. She started daycare of October of last year. She's been doing great. We're seeing huge, leaps and bounds as far as, just basic things that you want your 1-year-old to be able to do. And, they're great. It was funny. She just got, I don't want to say promoted, but she moved up to the next age group in class.
Okay.
And all the teachers in the newborn class were like, my wife was like, I don't know, it's weird. They're very standoffish and they didn't really say anything. And then later that evening, one of them messaged my wife on Facebook and was like, we really couldn't look at you guys leaving because we would have completely started bawling and everything because of that connection. And that's when it kind of set in. I was like, okay, she's in a good spot. She's in a good place, and I felt that long before, but it kind of was reassuring, right? So back to kind of what you were saying is that transition, right? I don't know if I want to be full-time or still kind of do the balancing act and kind of let my wife stay at home, or, it's something where I'm like, okay, look, let me see if I can do it full-time. I mean, in the perfect world, I'd be able to do both, right? But it's kind of seeing, what would be better for family, for our family, especially, if we're talking about kids, more kids in the future. Daycare is expensive. So it like you said, you always have those things that kind of, it's a Matt problem or, it's a me problem. Like I can probably do it in the future. I wouldn't say right now, right? More and more growth and consistency is a big thing. I think my biggest thing is like, I don't want to say putting it off, but which way are we going to go? Are we going to go me going full time or my wife staying home? And that's kind of like,
but what if you had both?
That's exactly like if,
right?
if we could do both, and then, or even if my wife could like cut back, cause she's a nurse, so they can pick up shifts and do everything. So we've kind of thrown every idea at the drawing board. And we're still kind of at that point where we're like, okay, what do we want to do? But you're right. You kind of set those like the next hurdle, right? Oh, I want to get to here. I want to get to here. I want to get to there.
Yeah.
And then here you are a year later, here you are 6 months later, whatever that time frame is. And you're like, well, all right, let me and then bonus time comes around like, well, I got to work,
You can wait a little longer.
Yeah.
And like that either or thinking too, that like you can't sustain your family doing the thing you love.
Yeah.
Right. And I had that same thing. Like when I left corporate, I set like my wife up with like low expectations. I was like, okay, so this first year, I think I'm only going to make like $15,000 like for the whole year. Just don't expect I'm going to make more than that. Right.
Yep.
And I did way better than I expected because I put that plan in place of, giving myself a period of time to really test my theory and really go all in on what I wanted to do. And then if it got to a point where I wasn't making money, like after a year, then it was like, okay, then the worst case scenario is I put my tail between my legs and I go get a job. Like that's really not even a bad scenario.
It's not.
So once I was able to kind of come to terms with that, it made it a lot easier. But that kind of thought error is the same thing I had, is it had to be like one or the other. Like I was leaving my successful career to work for pennies to do what I love at the sacrifice of my family. Yeah. Right. But then what I proved to myself is that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's very, like I said, like it's inspiring, right? You kind of, I don't want to say you took a leap, right? You didn't just kind of go out on a limb and just do whatever. You had a plan, you kind of built yourself up, and I kind of feel like I'm at that point now. I think you touched on a big point is, that support system around you, right? Making sure that you're all on the same page. I guarantee my wife is probably going to watch this, and it's shout out to her because I'm doing a lot of, the filming and the editing and the business side, but I wouldn't be able to do any of that if she wasn't doing everything else. And I'm not saying, I'm completely, checked out as a dad, right? But it's one of those where you kind of have to have that support, right? Even with close friends, with family, but more importantly, your team, right? You want to make sure that they're on board because you already have enough kind of pushing you in the wrong direction, right? With just life in general, and having that support is huge. And, I think you just had an episode of your podcast where you had your wife kind of, you guys switched roles.
Oh, yeah.
So
she took it over. Yep.
That's all like, and that type of thing is awesome. Right. And then it shows, and, it's exciting and it kind of, you build off of each other. Right. And, especially with my wife, she's very supportive. Like, hey, what are you going to do today? What's going on? And she understands, it's a grind, right? Yeah. It's not going to be overnight. And she's kind of investing in me, which is kind of giving me more drive to make sure, it works. So it's exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing to do is really to look at the math too. Like everything seems so much bigger and scarier when it's just in our head
Yeah.
of this, like, because you think you're just leaving all of this behind. But I mean, you could look at the math too of like for you, like based on the salary that you have now, like how many clients would you need? What type of projects would you need?
Yeah.
And some of the things, like you said that, like when we were talking about weddings, right? Like that if that's something you wanted to pick up just to kind of bring in something because you needed that little boost in revenue, but then you're doing this other work too, but just like knowing that math, that was really helpful for me. Like this is how many clients that I want to work with in order to make this amount of money, right? And then how you can build that makes it a lot more tangible as opposed to like, oh, I'm just on my own and I'm just trying to like make money.
Yeah, you're just kind of like, all right, what are we going to do today? No, and
Yeah.
I definitely have that number. I kind of have, I don't want to say they're official mentors, but there's
Yeah.
two gentlemen right outside of Gaithersburg that have kind of really helped me take, I was taking baby steps. Now I'm taking, toddler
Leaps.
steps. Yeah. So, it's,
that's great.
it's definitely, they've kind of, and it was one of those where, we went back and forth and talked a little bit. And then they were just like, hey, look, we see what you're doing. We see you're really trying to grow. We want to help you as much as we can, and I can't thank them enough for everything they've done as far as structure, right? That was my biggest thing. And like I said, YouTube University, you can only get so much out of that where you almost need that mentor, right? Somebody that's gone through the ups and downs and the oh, don't do it this way because that way never works type thing. I don't want to say it's a cheat code. I was actually just listening to Mr. Beast. I don't know if you know.
Oh, my kids love Mr.
Yeah.
Beast.
So on the podcast I was listening to, the last thing he ended with, excuse me, is mentors are the cheat codes of entrepreneurship. Like get with somebody or a coach, right?
Yeah.
Somebody that can kind of point you in the path and make sure that you're doing things the right way, and not so much right way as like, oh, you need to do it X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
but make sure it's on your path, right? Make sure it's
share their lessons learned
Yeah.
and like maybe help you think about things that you hadn't.
Sure. So
Yeah.
my next kind of question for you would be, so you kind of had this, I don't want to say turning of the tides, but this kind of leaving the corporate job. Do you kind of use what you learned through that process to help you with the coaching, like help you kind of put back into your business, like learn from experience type, you can kind of point people in the right direction?
Yeah, so I have a process that I created that helps them figure out, it's like 100% works every time, and it helps them. We create what is called a career protocol,
Okay.
and it identifies specifically what it is they want out of their role, and then I help them achieve that.
Okay.
So I definitely leverage of my experience, of course, and so I think what makes my service unique or really valuable for the people that I work with is that it's kind of coaching but also consulting, because I have a career in talent development. That's an area of expertise that I have. So I know the skills that are needed. I know what it's like to work in the industry. But then I've also done things for myself, like navigated promotions or being kind of the only woman in the room, or I've written my own job description at my last company, and I've like been able to kind of negotiate what I do based on what I'm interested in. And so I've helped a lot of people do that also. So I definitely am able to take things that I've done and leverage those, and then also with my own coaching processes.
Sure. So do you see your clients, are they more trying to get into a better position, like get a promotion, or are they trying to kind of do what you did where they're moving into entrepreneurship or business owning their own business, a mix in between? Kind of give me like, I don't want to say a breakdown, but
Yeah, I mean, the ones that are looking to make a career change, they're in a place where they feel stuck, and they're either trying to get promoted and that promotion isn't happening, so they know that they want that next level and it's just not working out for them, and they've tried everything that they can think of and they're just staying stuck where they are, or they're at a place where they want a change in their career but they're not sure what it is. So they've kind of worked really hard, they're usually very academic, gotten to a certain point, and then they're like, okay, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing, or I don't feel I'm making an impact in the work that I'm doing, or I'm kind of bored, I'm not passionate about what I do, but I don't know what it is that I want to do. So it's different from us, where we were like, this is what I want to do.
How do I
They
get there?
don't know what it is that they want a lot of the time. And so that's what my process goes through, is identifying exactly what it is that they want.
Yeah. Okay. And what challenges come with that? Like, is it something where, you know, you see the same reoccurring challenges throughout everybody? You kind of get a little bit, you know, something different every time. What are like the big kind of things you see?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very similar. So I just started pivoting more to group programs because I am having the same conversations over and over again, one-on-one. And so that kind of feeling of where they want to be and where they want to go to is the same. The other piece that is similar is really just the confidence piece of making a change, stepping out on your own. A lot of people will tend to lose themselves in just the way that our society is. I mean, from the time that we're born, like we are being conditioned to be someone other than who is naturally us. And so an example I like to use for that is really simple, is that when you're born naked, and then someone puts clothes on you and decides you have to wear clothes, and these are the clothes you
And
have
shoes,
to wear,
yeah.
right?
That's I jokingly say shoes because that's like our big thing that we're doing with our daughters. She's now, you know, they do recess and everything. So like, okay, time to start wearing shoes every day. And now there's Velcro on the shoes. So now Velcro is now something fun to play with. So, but no, that's a really good analogy of, you know, you kind of are.
You're being molded.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And so and then you're also being taught that there's a right way to do things. So you kind of have your parents that meanwhile, or your caretakers around you that are showing you like what's right, what's wrong, what success is, how much money you should make, how much money is too much money, how you should feel about yourself, who's pretty, who's not. Like all of these things you're being taught as you're growing up, and then you're in school and there's a grading system, right? Where it's, you know, you want to get an A. If you're not getting an A, you're not smart enough, right? Which is really arbitrary. And there's standardized testing, right? Where you're just learning to pass a test. You do the same thing in college. You do the same thing in your career. Like when you're in your career and you're putting on a rating scale of you're a 3, meaning you're meeting expectations, you're a 5, you're exceeding, you're taught again to like look at what other people are doing that are where you want to be and mold yourself into that. And so what happens is a lot of the people that come to me are, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, and they're like, okay, I don't even know what I want anymore. I don't even know what is going to make me happy at this point because I've kind of lost myself.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the work that we do too, is bringing them back to who they are and what's authentic to them. Like what are those things that are really going to light them up? What are their talents and their skills that maybe they've forgotten about? And then we amplify those and figure out what role is going to be best for them. And so that is all the same with everyone that I work with, as well as like my process includes like a testing component too, because I don't want to throw anyone into something that they're not ready for, because the grass can seem greener, and then they go and test it out and they're like, oh, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. So we want to make sure that it's actually going to be the right fit for them before they, like, say, for example, leave their full-time job and go full-time into something else.
It's funny because my last episode, we were jokingly, and I made a statement. I don't know, a statement. It was a quote that I've heard, and I even made sure I was like, look, I didn't make up this quote, but it kind of applies to this, is that sometimes, you know, the grass isn't always greener. Sometimes it's artificial turf. Sometimes it looks nice, but once you get over there, you're like, I don't know. But that's a good way to put it, you know, is, you know, you're there to kind of help people, one, figure out what they want to do, right? What is it that they truly will make them happy? And I think, you know, it's, for me, it's stuff like this.
This episode is brought to you by Prospect Pantry in Newmarket, Maryland. Whether you're on the go or have some time to stop in to listen to some great music, Prospect Pantry has you taken care of. From their awesome acai bowls to their fresh soups, with a menu that is changing by the season, they're always creating delicious dishes that are based on the freshest ingredients. Not only do they have great food and drinks, but they love to support small businesses in the community. Make sure to stop in during one of their open mic nights. For more information, go to www.prospectpantry.com and check them out.
So you were saying with challenges that you see, you know, where you kind of have like consistent but also new challenges.
Yeah, and it's not always a drastic jump, too. Sometimes people are afraid to even figure out what they want because they're worried that it's going to result in them having to quit their job. Like, it's almost like the ignorance is bliss. Like, well, what if I discover that I would rather have my own business, or I would rather work in a totally different industry or department, and I start over? Like, that seems more scary than just being unhappy right now because it's good enough.
Yeah.
And so like they can convince themselves to kind of settle, but it's often not really drastic. Like I've definitely had people that have gone into consulting or started their own business and left industry or worked within industry, but or like I had someone that really wanted to have a horse farm. Like all different things have come out of that process. But a lot of times, like I would say 95% of the time, it's really just tweaking what you're already doing. Like you've kind of lost your drive, but there are things that you can do to even change the role that you're in, or maybe move into another department and get some experience somewhere else. Or sometimes it's even just finding hobbies and things that you love that you just lost track of and just integrating them into your life because you've kind of gotten into a routine of just going to work and it's just good enough and you're not energized and you're taking care of kids and you're doing all these things and you're just not having anything for you. And it's just figuring out what is that thing for you. And then sometimes it's a big change and sometimes it's not. But the outcome for everyone is that you know exactly what you want. You're more confident in who you are and like the value that you want to bring to yourself and to others.
Yeah.
You're working less. And most times, if you're moving into a promotion or another role, you're definitely making more money.
Yeah. No, and I can kind of build off that because, you know, I think the last time we were working together, I was in one department. Since then, I've switched, which kind of catapulted me into being able to do more of my business, going from working 9 to 5 or 7 to 4, whatever it was at the time, to now, you know, switching shifts and working a little bit of a not, you know, the daily schedule you hear everybody work, kind of open that door of kind of getting the best of both worlds, right? Getting the opportunity to still hold on to that full-time job, you know, go in and punch the clock, do the normal thing, but then also have the opportunity outside of that to then really kind of get a trial run, you know, really see like, okay, is this something that I can do? Is it something that I want to do, right? A lot of times you see sometimes people kind of, you might have seen it more than others, is jump into something and then they're quickly like, nope, this is, I changed my mind, you know, or the opposite where they're like, I'm so glad I did this, you know. And I actually was talking to my wife about a month ago and I said, you know, that initial change from department, right? That was a very challenging decision for myself because I enjoyed who I was working with. The job wasn't hard. It was, I would find that I didn't have enough hours in the day, right? And a lot of people probably come across that. But it was one of those where it was a very difficult decision of like kind of leaving and going to a completely different department, doing a completely different line of work, and really like, okay, what is that going to do? Like one of my closest friends I worked with every day, right? We would hang out outside of work, the whole thing. And then about a month ago, I told my wife, I was like, I'm so happy I made that decision because it has really gotten me the opportunity to really do what I enjoy while also having that safety net of the full-time job, you know, and seeing like, can I do this? Is it something that I want to do? And kind of like what I was saying, you get that trial run. And I think that decision, you know, was one of the better decisions that I've made, you know, and obviously, you know, everything happens for a reason. I think that was one of those reasons like, okay, here's the opportunity, right? It was one conversation that kind of sparked this idea. I ran with it and now here I am. I'm like, okay, now I actually get the opportunity to try to do what I want to do.
Yeah. And I think that is definitely really valuable. Like same with me. Like when I started my career when I was out of high school, I started thinking I was going to be a social worker. And so I worked in child welfare for a number of years. And then I decided that's not something that I wanted before I moved into industry. And all of those experiences are little clues to what you might like. I'm really a big proponent of having mentors, of kind of saying yes to things, even if you're not sure it's a good fit for you, just to check it out, just to see what you like and what you don't like, because it's definitely going to give you data. And then what I do with my process is I really try to collapse that timeline. So instead of spending like I did, like years trying to figure things out and then getting the courage to make the change, is really getting clear on what you want within a couple of weeks. And then let's figure out if that's a good fit for you. Like the horse farm client that I had, she really was like excited about leaving her industry job and having this horse farm. And then we did the research, we did the testing out, we did some networking where she got to know a little bit more about what that would take, and decided that's not actually something that she wanted. It was actually more work than she anticipated because of that grass is greener, right? It's just like, I'm just going to be with the horses all day. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And then you see like the cost involved, the space you need, like how much work it really is. And then what we found is that there was actually a volunteer organization that used horses with children as part of therapy that she wanted to get involved with. And so she did that with her career, and then we just tweaked what she did for her role, made her role more meaningful. She was able to be on more projects that she really loved. She got promoted, and then she did this on the side, and that combination was what really set her on the path to her own happiness.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to hear, because, you know, again, you helping people kind of figure that out, it's got to be very rewarding on your end. You know, obviously, you know, you run a business, you want to, you know, make as much money as you can, but at the same time, you're getting more value than the dollar, right? More value than what they're paying you to help them with. You kind of get to see them go from, I'm not sure what I want to do, to, I can't believe that I'm finally doing what I enjoy. And that's got to be priceless, I guess is a good way to put it.
For sure. And I honestly, money wasn't a big motivator for me. My wife always reminds me when I like have a goal and I don't meet it, or I try something and it doesn't go as well as I thought it was going to go, that I said when I started my business, if I could just help one person, that it would be worth it. Because the idea of someone trusting me, hiring me like person to person, not because we worked together, I had a company behind me other than my own, and me being able to help them be happier in their life, to like overcome trauma they've had, like all of these things that I help people with, like to help one person is so meaningful. And now I've been lucky enough to do that over and over and over again. But that's really what drives me, is it's just when you think about the ripple effect of that work, where they're better parents, they're better partners, they're better friends, you know, they're happier, they show people what's possible, and that changes like the whole generational line that they're in. And so that really motivates me, and to be able to make money to do that is just icing on the cake.
Yeah. You don't even think about the money side. You're just more, you're kind of happy with the helping the other people side.
Yeah.
And I have a very similar mindset. You know, I do a little bit different, you know, business, right? But at the same time, I enjoy, you know, helping, you know, one of the last businesses I worked, you know, made content for, you know, they're like, hey, this is month 2. We are brand new in the business. And I said, all right, let's do what we can do. You know, let's work at your pace, you know, because obviously, you know, it's tough doing stuff for free, where, you know, it is beneficial in some situations, some it's not. And you really kind of figure that out along the way. But it was one of those where I was like, look, you know, I'm here to help you. You know, let's kind of capitalize on everything that I can do for you while I'm here. And that same idea, right? You know, that promotional video, and then kind of cutting up little clips for them to then use on social media. You know, I think a lot of people don't realize that you can really value stack a lot of things you do, especially on social media and content. And that's where like I want to say expertise, but that's exactly what I'm trying to get into, as far as like showing people like, look, there's a way to kind of value. But going off of what you said is like, I saw this business brand new. They're still like that exciting. Like we just started, like, you know, they were a brick and mortar, or they are a brick and mortar, you know, and it's one of those where I'm like, more power, you know, I wish you all the luck, all the success in the world, you know, and my biggest thing is I always follow and stay up, you know, up to speed with all the businesses I work with, because I want to see them grow. And if it's not through me, and I tell them all the time, like, you know, for example, if we start talking about content, look, I'm going to pitch you my idea. I'm going to tell you what I can help you with, or, you know, how we can, all the different things we can do. If you want to go forward with it, I'm all for it, right? Let's get started. If you're like, look, it's not my budget, or I don't think it's something that we want to do, that's fine too. I still want to see you succeed. There's nothing that I'm not going to be like, oh, well, they don't want to work with me. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to comment and do everything I can, because I know from the business side, it's tough. and seeing that success really kind of pays off in the long run.
Yeah, and you do such great things like elevating small businesses, whether it's like having people on your podcast here or even finding places to film that's giving people more exposure. I think that that's great. And I'm similar in the way that I approach my business is I don't slide into people's DMs or anything like that. I kind of share what I know. I share like value to try to help people. They reach out to me. We have a consultation call usually, and then I share with them my process, how I can help them. And if they're like, yes, let's do it, great. If they're like, no, it's not the right time for me to invest or whatever it is, then that's fine. Then like, that's why I have my podcast. That's why I do different free things so that people can always get some sort of help from me, regardless of where they're at and their ability to invest financially.
Yeah. And I'm very similar, right? I try to put out, I catch myself not posting as consistent as I want. Yeah. That's kind of one of my 2023 goals is, okay, let's get more consistent. And I just realized we're halfway through the year, July is 6 months, which is halfway. So it's one of those where I'm like, all right, let's start, even for the past 2 weeks, I think I've been a little bit more consistent. So it's one of those where like, I want to see people grow and even if they're not working with me directly, I do, I put out tips. Like I think the last video I put out was talking about reminders about posting, right? Something that I use myself. I'm like, okay, let me just make a 30-second video talking about this and maybe it'll help somebody get a little bit more consistent with posting. It'll come across somebody's plate and they'll see it and it's like, oh, that's great. And then they'll just keep on moving. And I know that if, help them, even if it's just a little bit, it's still worth it, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So the last question I'm going to ask you, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, is what advice would you give somebody, or coaching advice, kind of however you want to see it, that's looking to jump into starting a business, or not even jump into, but just starting a business in general?
Yeah, that's a big question. I definitely think that if there is something that, like, if you don't feel like you belong kind of in the corporate space, or you just have this idea of the solution that you can help people with, like, businesses are really just providing solutions. So if you have a problem that people have and you have the solution to it, like, you could have a business if that's something that you want. You won't know until you try. So if you can set yourself up to be able to just try, whether it's on the side or if you're fortunate enough to just go in full time right away, whatever it is, but like you're not going to harm anything by trying and just getting started. There's a lot of information out there. With that said, I do think it's important that you don't get so caught up in what everyone else is doing for your business. And that's just a lesson that I learned. So when I started my business, I knew I had a solution I could provide and that it was valuable. I was new to being a CEO. I was new to marketing myself. And so I looked to other people to help me with those things when I realized, oh, wait, like, at first I had a lot of clients coming from where I used to work because I was that talent person. So it was like, oh, now you're over here. Okay, you can help me over here. But eventually I had to get broader, and to market myself was a new skill that I had to learn. And there's a lot of advice out there, but it's based also on what worked for them, and everyone has their own business model. And I've kind of gone the long way, but I think that you have to just, at the end of the day, follow your own intuition around what works for you, the kind of business that you want to have, not to lose sight of that. Like we talked about before around like starting a business, and then you kind of get caught up in the money or caught up in the grind, and you like forget why you started that business to begin with. So a lot of that is just staying true to you. And you can figure anything out. Like, everything is a problem that can be solved. And when I started to look at things that way, as whatever was happening in my business, this is just a problem and I can solve it. Like, things just got a lot easier. So if anyone's looking to start a business, I would say just try. It's a lot easier than you think. I thought like to establish an LLC, to start a business was like very fancy, like not for me. Like I don't know who was doing this, but like that was too fancy. Like maybe you needed a lawyer or something. But you could actually, like for Maryland, you can just go online and just establish your LLC, and they take a little bit of money from you, but then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So
it's one of those where you have there's a lot of resources, right? And I did the same thing. Probably about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year. And it was one of those, okay, let's start getting official. A lot of it was before, and I'll be the first one to say it was, on the side, not really, officially a business. And then I was like, no, let's kind of, that was my first step. It was, let's make it official, right? Let's kind of really invest and really kind of put that title to it, the LLC behind the name. And it's definitely, like you said, it's a lot easier than people think. There's a lot of resources that will help people, right? It might be a little bit more pricey, right? Because everybody, sees a problem, they have a solution. And, that was I have a business degree, and that was the first thing I learned in business is there's no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Yeah.
But there are resources for people to use if you want to start a business, if you want to become, I don't want to say legitimate, right? But having that LLC or sole proprietor, whatever route you want to go or whatever works best for you, you're right. It's a lot easier than people realize, for sure.
Yeah, and like test your theory, right? Like I think myself included, a lot of people take things really seriously. Like now I'm a business and I have to be this certain way. And all you have to do is like meet people, network with them, tell them what you do, and like offer to help them.
Yeah.
And that's really all that it is just building relationships and offering to help people when they're interested in what you have to offer. And you can build a very successful business that way. It doesn't have to take more than that. You don't have to do paid ads, and you don't have to do all these like other things. You can just kind of go out and talk to people.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people will get kind of, I don't want to say bogged down, but they'll think they have to do all of these crazy different things. And I've kind of ventured into some of them, paid ads and the whole thing. It's one of those where I feel like the really biggest thing to kind of get people that are genuine about wanting to work with your business is that networking, right? Reaching out, whether it be, you have a connection with somebody and they're looking and they're throwing your name in front of them, or you're getting out. I mean, there's a couple of times where I've just walked into businesses. I'm like, hey, do you guys want a promotional video? Hey, do you guys want to do any type of content making? I'm here. I mean, last week I went up to a car dealership and I was like, hey, let me just shoot a 30-second video of your hottest car on the lot, right? Something. And you guys can use it for free. I'm building a portfolio, but two, if they like it, they like what they see, then we kind of open that door, and you can't be, I don't say you can't be afraid, but it's definitely one of those where you really, that networking is huge with getting in contact, going to your chambers of commerce meeting and really kind of putting yourself out there. And it's tough, I almost want to say it's like the dating game of going and, kind of making those connections. But the more you do it, the easier it's going to be, right? And that was my biggest thing. And I jokingly have a story that I tell people is that the very first time I went to try to talk to a business, I sat in my car for maybe 20 minutes and I was like talking myself up and kind of going back and forth. And then I finally was like, okay, that's it. I'm going up there. I walked up and I went to open the door and I pulled the door and it was locked. And I was like, the business is closed. Like,
right.
Like it was one of those where I was so worried about, I was in my own head that I didn't even think, and the answer was right there. The hours were right on the door. So, it kind of put like a reality check. And I joke about it now. At the time I was petrified. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, somebody saw me. But it kind of like that comedic relief of like, it's a funny story. Now it's kind of built that, well, it can't be worse than the first time I ever tried, going to talk to a business. They were closed. So I kind of built off of that, and I've gotten way more, it's been a little bit easier for myself to talk to people and network, like you said. Yeah,
you build your confidence as you get going. And I think a lot of people think you have to have the perfect process and the perfect solution just to get started. And you really don't. The way that I marketed myself and what I called myself when I first started is different than today. And I've always gone through just saying like, this is how I can help you now. Let's do that. And then it's just, you'll find, just like when we talked about careers, you'll find your niche, the thing that you really love, the process, you'll develop your own IP. You'll do all of that as you get going, but that doesn't come until you get going. And it is a big test, I think, of your confidence. You build a lot of confidence. It's putting yourself out there. It's vulnerable to start a business. Because similarly, you don't have a company vouching for you. You don't have, you are the company. So you have to go do that yourself, as opposed to, that was something I didn't anticipate when I worked with my last company, is I had this talent and development role. And so people were just sent to me. I didn't have to market myself. They just that was my job. Where when I came on my own, I was like, oh, I actually have to tell people who I am, and I have to vouch for myself. I have to build credibility on my own.
Yeah.
I don't have that company behind me that's saying, oh, we picked her to do this, so she's good enough. I had to do that myself.
She got the role, right?
Yeah, and that's vulnerable
qualified
to go and say, hi, I can help you. Oh, who are you? Okay, well, now you have to show. And like the free value, like doing that is such a great idea. And the worst that's going to happen when you put yourself out there is you're going to feel bad.
Yeah, and people are going to say, no, thank you.
Yeah, and they're going to be like, oh, you'll be embarrassed. And then you move on to the next one. And the more that happens, the less you'll feel bad for as long. It'll just get shorter and shorter and shorter.
And on the plus side, when you do get somebody that goes, yeah, absolutely, it makes it that much more rewarding, right? When you get no, yes, you're kind of like, okay, I work for this a little bit more. I also see it as I want to put more value in what I'm doing for that yes, because I know there's a whole slew of no's that are probably going to follow it or may or may not. You never know. But I kind of see it as like, man, okay, now I got my opportunity. Now I really want to make the best of it. So I'm really going to put a lot of work into it. And I think that's kind of like that idea of, you sometimes have to go through a little bit to get that value. And because if it was easy, everybody would do it. I think that's like the number one thing people say about starting a business. And two, you have to kind of earn your keep, right? You kind of have to get through those hard conversations to finally get in front of somebody that's like, yeah, let's go. And, and then you just build off of it and, brick by brick, and you just slowly develop your skills. And it might not be your best work, but as long as your intentions are there, you're really trying to help them and yourself, and you really kind of want to see it be successful. It's very hard for it to not be successful. You put in what you want to get out of it almost.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful if you don't get attached to a yes. If you're just kind of going in saying like, I have this, you'll start to see yourself as equal to all of the people you've maybe put on a pedestal in your life of like, oh, we're all just people. We're all just humans.
Yeah.
And like when you put yourself out there in that way, then you're like, oh, I could do this too. And some people like to make that switch of like, instead of going and saying, I'm going to try to get this client, for example, we'll say I'm going and I'm collecting no's. I'm going up and I'm talking to people and I'm just going to collect as many no's as I can, because those no's, like you're going to have more no's than yeses maybe, but like that's okay because that's just part of the business. And they might be a no for just right now. Like I've had people that are like, no, not right now. And then they come back to me 6 months, a year later, and they're like, okay, now I'm ready. Let's do it.
And then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And, the other part of it is you can get value from no's. Whereas, excuse me, where, you kind of you go through the I don't want to say sales pitch, but you go through your offer and you talk to people about what it is you can do for them, and maybe you stumble through it, right? Maybe you learn, okay, maybe I shouldn't start with this, because they're quickly not interested. Maybe I kind of tweak how I word it, right? Or just, how can I go into it differently, right? If you're always learning from the interactions, then you can't really call it a failure. It's the ones where you're like, oh, well, they said no, I'm going to go sit and watch TV for the rest of the afternoon and not really do anything. And if that's your way of coping, that's fine. But make sure you're getting off the sofa and you're getting right back out there. And tomorrow you're hitting 2 more businesses and seeing what you can do, or 2 more potential clients, and see what you can do. And I think, I agree. I think it's a grind for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I really appreciate you coming out and sitting down and talking. Melissa's stuff is going to be linked in the description. I'm going to put all your social medias. We'll kind of, touch base and make sure I put everything you need in there. I definitely want to get you, as much, it was a great conversation. I want as many people to see it as possible. So, like I said, stuff will be linked. I'm again very appreciative of you taking some time on, right before the 4th of July to sit down and talk. And, looks like the sun's coming out, so we kind of perfect timing, right?
So. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.